if you take a step back from just like the mobile app stores or mobile payments, you look at like the tech companies and what we've seen the last 20 years around social and mobile is very parallel to what happened 150 years ago as America went through industrialization. You had this rise of these big robber baron monopolies and oligopolies around like the railroads and banking. And I think at a certain point, the American people decided that that was too much concentration of power.
What's happening with D2C in gaming? Hello, and welcome to Growth Masterminds, the podcast for growth marketers. My name is John Goodsir. We all see it, right? The winds of change are blowing, in-app payments are evolving. It's clearly not just going to be one payment provider, even the platform owner like the App Store or Google Play. So what's happening right now? How does it work? And where's it all going? To chat, we have a returning guest, Archie Stonehill. He leads product at stash.gg. And we have Justin Ken, who's entrepreneur, investor, co-founder of Twitch, which was acquired by Amazon in 2014 for $970 million. And he's also an investor and one of the early guys at Stash, among many other things. Welcome, both of you.
Hey, John, how are you?
Hey, doing well. Good to see you guys again. Good to chat. Archie, it was like a year ago that we chatted last. I don't expect everybody just remembers instantly. Give us like the 30 seconds of what Stash does.
Sure. So Stash builds kind of direct consumer player experiences. So ways that developers can interface directly with their players. There's a few examples of this or ways that manifest in our product. So one is web shops, which a lot of people in the mobile industry have become familiar with over the last year. And there are other kind of web-based engagement experiences, content, matchmaking. We can dig into some of the specifics there. And then the other one is desktop launches. So you think about Riot, for example, distributes their game directly on desktop. So we also build those for their customers.
Sweet. Awesome. You know what? I'm going to bring in Justin in a second to give us some context as to why he thought, hey, this is an area I want to invest in. I want to go towards everything. Archie, before we do that, what's new in the past year since we've chatted? What have you added?
Oh my God. Well, the market's exploded with a lot of regulatory unlocks, so we can dig more into that. At Stash, we've had an amazingly busy year. So we've gone live with our first customers for our web shop product and our launcher product. Our pledge really is based on focusing on building this player experience layer and making these, really premium, custom, bespoke player experiences that like complement and supplement your game.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what we've managed to do, and I think what you've seen a lot of the industry do is do the kind of base functionality. So like build, a launcher that distributes games, a web shop that sells things, and now can kind of move on to a lot of the stuff that, we consider our differentiators, our expertise, like loyalty programs, which we design with our customers based on each game's specific economy and aesthetic and needs. Or, other content features that support your gameplay, can help with onboarding or could help with deepening engagement, depending on your specific needs in your community.
Gotcha. Cool. So yeah, we're going to get into the regulatory stuff because I want to talk about the EU. I want to talk about a couple other areas. Even the US has started, you're starting to see some legislation starting to get written. I mean, not necessarily by those in power, but there's some attempts to do a few things there. Justin, pop in here a second. Obviously, you're an investor in a lot of different things, and you started many companies and exited from them very successfully. What did you see? Why did you want to get in this space?
Yeah, so we started Stash, just over a year ago, and the philosophy behind it was, we kind of saw that there was this hole in the market where you had these large distribution platforms effectively rent seeking, the universe of game companies that were providing these amazing experiences to players and not providing that much value for the amount of tax they were kind of taking. And so I think there's been this huge amount of interest from the game studios in figuring out ways they can directly communicate with and directly interact with and directly sell things to their player base. And so, I always kind of follow the customer first whenever I'm thinking about a new business. And that's what we did at Twitch is, at Twitch, we saw like, okay, there's this before Twitch, we had this company, Justin TV, which is this platform for anyone to broadcast. Yeah.
Invented live streaming, basically.
Yeah. We were like one of the first live streaming platforms, and we saw, hey, there's this niche of, this kind of streamer that's streaming video games. that really wants to reach this audience. And we said, hey, what do you guys want? We were like really curious. So we went to them. We asked, what do you guys want? And they told us, they wanted to grow their audiences and they wanted to be able to make money so they could do it professionally. And so we said, okay, like let's listen to them and figure out how to build products for them. And that's what became Twitch. And here we're just really taking the same philosophy, which is like our customers, the game studio. We think game studios are really awesome. We're all gamers. We like the products that they make. And we think game studios deserve to be supported and like directly owning their own customers. And so we've kind of created Stash as not a platform. It's like really a company and a suite of software tools that serve game studios in helping them do that.
Cool. Archie, what's the win? So like, assume you're some game publishers listening to this and they're going like, okay, I know how things work in the traditional app economy. I get 70% of what somebody actually pays in a lot of cases. In other cases, I may get more. It's complex, all that stuff, but I get 70%. So I pay 30% off the top, right? And there's some delays in my payments from Apple or from Google, but I kind of know that. If I go kind of solo on my own and I do a web shop, it's not free, right? I've got to have that. I've got to build that platform. I pay some credit card fees. I may have to build some infrastructure and some people or outsource that for customer service or other things like that. So what's the upside? Is there a 10%, a third of that 30% that I have as upside? Is it 2/3 of that 30%? How do you see that?
Yeah. So I think at Stash, our average incremental, like additional revenue you're getting right now, based on our current numbers, is about 25% plus. And the way that that's possible, even with Stash taking a 5% fee, is that that uplift is 25% of net revenue. So if I'm a developer and I earn $100 from Apple, what's actually happening there is the player is actually spending more, like $143, because 70% of 143 is 100. And so at Stash, we take a 5% Stash fee, and then there's some additional fees that are variable based on payment processing methods and stuff like that. But what that nets out on is normally it's unsurprising for us to be getting 30% uplift on net revenue from direct channels, as well as a bunch of other non-direct financial benefits.
So 25 to 30% additional new revenue that I wasn't getting before. Do people typically run this in conjunction with in-app payments? And do players in the games make decisions about where they buy? And does this 25, I'm asking like 3 questions at once. This is awful.
No, it's great.
Hopefully you remember it. Dude, is this 25 to 30% extra? Does that include is that after any drop off as people take additional steps to pay?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would say
3 questions.
It's a great set of questions. One of those was great. I would say that I would never think of this as, I think actually you can make a mistake when you try and make direct channels your exclusive channel, the only way to access content. So almost every developer I know that operates a web shop does it alongside in-app, having some kind of in-app monetization. Because the thing about direct channels is they're really for your most engaged players. This is not really going to be a channel I would use to convert new players to spend. It's really a way to
purchase of 5 gems for 99 cents.
Exactly. I think if you can't drive a first-time conversion within gameplay, it's going to be hard for us to do it on your web store. But really, a lot of what you described is kind of how I think about what Stash's product and value proposition is. Which is that if you think about, payments in the game space, payments in general was pretty uncomfortable with the free-to-play model of games for a number of reasons. One, microtransactions are weird for conventional payment processors. 2, it's quite vulnerable to digital fraud since you don't have a physical delivery address. There's less ways to know exactly who you're selling to. So for a number of reasons, the payments industry took a while to kind of catch up with free-to-play digital monetization, but it kind of has done it over the last 10, 15 years. It's really solved now that the standard payment processes are pretty comfortable with digital purchases. So what is the challenge in payments, quote unquote, in games is really not processing payments. It's capturing player spend. It's finding a way for players to spend through a channel that, you can process yourself, versus spending through the app stores or through Steam. And so a lot of what our job is entirely our job is to build that, combined value proposition to players on behalf of developers that is so good that they will do something that's pretty unintuitive and inconvenient, which is like move to a first-party distribution channel. And many other industries have done that. They've disintermediated distributors and stuff like that. And oftentimes they've had to sacrifice convenience for other benefits for their customers. And so we design those benefits, whether it's loyalty or other ways to engage with the game. And so often I would actually argue that in the context of these web experiences for your whales, for your most bought-in users, you can actually, drive more spend and, enhance your value proposition and grow your overall player spend, as well as capturing more margin on that spend.
Well, yeah, exactly right. That's the thing. I'll give you a discount and then you'll actually spend more than you would have spent, and I'll end up getting more. And since it's all virtual goods anyways, I'm happy, happy, happy. Makes sense. And we see that in other spaces as well. Justin, to come back to you, as you were thinking of this space and wondering about building in this space and investing in this space, I wonder, and Archie might chime in here, what percentage of the app economy do you think is quote unquote underground, quote unquote, away from the App Store or Google Play? This is not brand new, right? We've been hearing about this for years. Typically, some of the biggest developers, some of the biggest game publishers have been doing some of this stuff. They've been doing some in-house stuff for years and years with their top players. And it was very hush hush, very quiet, because, there was no legislative or regulatory environment that demanded this or even encouraged this or other things like that. Now it's getting a little more out in the open and a little more, hey, this is the way the world is working now, moving there. But what percentage do you think is underground or outside the App Store, Google Play payment functionality?
I don't know if I have overall stats. Archie might be able to chime in with them, but the top games that have really invested in this have been able to drive maybe 30% of their revenue. That's kind of the internal benchmark that we see. So for like top mobile games that have really invested, which is right now a minority of people in the space. There has been, like you said, a nervousness. You have like a single or duopoly supplier that controls your entire revenue stream. And so people are afraid to like do things that rock the boat without knowing what where they sit from a regulatory standpoint, from a legislative standpoint. And so, justifiably, a lot of game studios are afraid to experiment, or have been historically. And now you see this regime changes coming, and we'll talk about the regulatory side in a moment, I think. But I think what's more interesting for us is like, we think of this as like growth industry, in that, there have been really two big waves in, the App Store and gaming on mobile gaming, right? One, the first is like the invention of the App Store and Google Play and the payments and like inside and in-app purchases, which drove this whole economy and all these different genres that have popped up and flourished. And then we think this is the second, where there's like more of a, regulatory opening that allows the game studios to directly access and directly communicate with their players. And I think that's, I think to me, it's like everyone in the next 2 years, every mobile studio will use something like Stash. It might not be us. It could be a competitor. There's other players out there, but they'll use something like it because, everybody's looking for an edge and how to, keep more of the revenue.
Can't do the math in my head right now, but if 30% of the top publishers' revenue is off the books, so to speak, of Apple and Google, I mean, there's something. If you looked at all the top publishers, who get the majority of the revenue, and you kind of add 50% to some of those iOS and Google Play numbers, you get some big numbers there, Archie.
I think if you can approach this question by looking at it by genre, which I think is probably the most helpful, high level breakdown of the market when thinking about direct to consumer. So there are some genres that are much more suited for this than others. First of all, you have to have in-app purchase revenue in order for you to take a margin on it. And so the genres where you've seen the most uptake are mid-core and casino, for sure. And within mid-core, you have RPG and strategy, and to some extent shooter as well. And then casino and all derivations of casino, like luck battlers, have been massive in this market. Monopoly Go has a phenomenal web store, for example. And then to some extent, other genres like puzzle, simulation, those do have some penetration of direct to consumer, some games more than others. And the one I would say is 30% is kind of a very top performing public figure. So a very top performing web store will be hitting 30%. Some games at like major publishers are doing north of 50 or 60%, depending on the specific profile of that game. Often if you have, hyper whale monetization, or you're a pretty old game with users who have been playing it for a very long time, who are very bought in, who are very regular spenders, you can get your numbers up to 70 or 80%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's impressive.
Maybe adjacent to that, you also see a lot of success in mobile to PC cross-platform plays with first-party launches. So you look at a company like Raid, Shadow Legends, company like Plarium with their game Raid, which does not actually have a web store right now, but it does have a PC client that they distribute directly via Plarium Play. And I think that Raid's revenue, 35% of it is coming from their PC client. So same with games like from Scopely or MiHoYo, or even I've been playing a lot of AFK Journey, which is a PC client. So even more than or alongside for certain genres, web stores, anything with cross-platform potential often will have a good shot at first-party launches. So I don't think it would be incorrect to see, north of 50% of certainly mobile industries revenue end up in first-party channels over the next few years.
And that's partially why you've come out with your web launcher product or your desktop launcher product, so that, you're a multi-platform game. And therefore, even by the strictest rules in the most old-fashioned geo, under the toughest legislation and regulation, you're 100% fine to take payments and apply them across wherever your game is published. Very, very, very cool. So we know the EU is working on opening up the App Store monopoly, Google Play monopoly, with Digital Markets Act. We know Korea's done some work there. Australia has done there. Even the US, there's been some legislation written over the past year or so. What else are you hearing? What else is happening? I'm sure the EU is still working. There's a couple lawsuits on that are going on. What are you hearing?
Yes. So the EU is always exciting to watch. We're now very much in the enforcement stage of their regulation, the Digital Markets Act, and they've proved that they're not going to let this slide. They've been pursuing Apple in particular quite aggressively, and determining that Apple was not in compliance with the Digital Markets Act requirements. And so, in theory, that could lead over the next year to fines in excess of 5% of Apple's gross global sales. So really significant.
Start a little smaller, but theoretically it could. I mean, the provisions in the Digital Markets Act are massive. They're huge, right? And Apple came out with what they thought was their response to DMA, and there was some convoluted stuff in there and challenges and a lot of costs. And I think by the letter of the law, some people would say they kind of followed it, and the EU said no, we're not going there.
Yeah, I think it's great that they are showing that I think with tech and regulation, often the tech companies will just, bamboozle the regulators, but the EU teams are showing that that is not going to be the case here, that they're going to cut through the BS and really get to the heart of, the very competitive ethos of these acts. And then in America, I think there's a number of exciting, near-term developments as well. So one major thing that changed since we spoke last, John, is that the Federal Department of Justice launched an antitrust investigation of Apple. Obviously, with a new administration, we'll see how that evolves. But that would be a landmark prosecution if they successfully hold Apple to account on really restricting the App Store competition and super app stores within stores where they kind of targeted most clearly. And then even if that takes a number of years to progress, which it probably will. There's also the outcome of the various Epic Games trials. So Epic won a complete decision against Google in December of 2023. And we are still, and the judge came out with his determination of the outcome of the remedy in that case. And it was more aggressive than anyone thought it would be. It was basically Epic's wish list, including opening up native app payments to be completely an open ecosystem, which is wild. That's, on pause while various appeals happen. But even if some version of that remedy goes into effect, it would be game changing for Google Play. And even the Apple case, Apple versus Epic, which Epic mostly lost, but did win on one count. Apple, in a similar way to the EU, came out with compliance that involved taxing purchases that were sourced from within the App Store, even if they didn't take place within the app. The judge, she does not seem like she's going to accept that either. So she's been pressing Apple extremely hard, backing some of the discussions that took place in April and May. So I'm quite excited that this will be continue to be somewhere we see major gains and hopefully some really nice surprises.
Justin, maybe situate all this for us historically and give us some context here, where you think the space will move, where you think we'll be in 2-3 years. We know that there's the appeals process. We know that when you're a mega corp with hundreds of billions of dollars, you can throw thousands of lawyers at things and you can delay. Where do you think we'll eventually get in the mobile space?
Yeah, I just think about it as more of a historical context and like, where's popular sentiment? I think this generally in tech, if you take a step back from just like the mobile app stores or mobile payments, you look at like the tech companies and what we've seen the last 20 years around social and mobile is very parallel to what happened 100 years ago, 150 years ago with, as America went through industrialization, you had this rise of these big robber baron monopolies and oligopolies around like the railroads and banking. And I think at a certain point, the American people decided that that was too much concentration of power. And they created antitrust legislation and, to take power from these oligopolies. And I think if you just, take a step back from like the specifics of what does the DMA say or what cases are being prosecuted specifically, I think everybody feels the sentiment change in the tech industry. I've been in the tech industry for my whole career, 20 years. And, I've seen the sentiment go from like, oh, it's like a cheeky band of rebels, building some cool fringe product to, these major political parties feel like these companies have too much power aggregation. And so I don't think there's really any coming back from that, from a sentiment perspective until, there is, I would say power is like taken away from centralized, kind of tech oligopolies. And I think the way that looks specifically here is, more requirements to open up, and make the different, layers of the API open playing fields. And, you saw that 25 years ago with, the Microsoft case and Internet Explorer bundling. So I think that's probably a likely outcome. I don't know, I'm not the legal expert who's going to say it's going to happen in 1 year, 2 years, or this way, or, we've seen some, that start. And I think once that starts, I just don't see like public sentiment changing. I think it's pretty bipartisan at this point.
You're the first person on Growth Masterminds, and I think I've done like 150 episodes now over like 3-4 years to reference 150 years ago.
It's
well before mobile was even a dream.
Yeah.
The most forward-thinking science fiction author, Jules Verne type. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
That I appreciate that. The other thing that made me think of as you were talking about that is a quote. I forget who it's from, but the day after the revolution, the most ardent rebel becomes a conservative, right? So you talked about the revolution, right? These guys in the garage and they're building this thing and it's so cool and it's wonderful and they're reinventing the world and they become the giants, right?
These companies have become, gone from startups to the establishment, and, because of the centralization of kind of power and data on the internet and like these economies of scale, they become like incredibly impactful to our world, like, or not just our country, but the whole world, and so like people get upset when there's so much concentration of power.
Yep. True.
Even actually, Mark Zuckerberg quite recently has been quite vocal about this issue. And I agree with Justin. All of this indicates there's like a zeitgeist for returning to a form of digital, like a form of the digital landscape that is more open. Something Mark Zuckerberg was specifically using the analogy of the Windows ecosystem versus the mobile ecosystem, and it being, his prediction and his goal, or whatever it's worth, that the next phase of the internet, however that looks, will be a lot more open than the mobile phase has been.
It's funny, hey, because of course he's a well-known advocate for the little guy.
Yeah, right. I'm like, okay, good to have.
But Threads, for instance, has been built with an open architecture that you can federate your content elsewhere. So there is some level of openness there as well. So that is interesting. Archie, this has been a ton of fun. Justin, I've really appreciated coming on. Any last hits, guys? What's exciting? What's coming up?
Well, lots of stuff coming from Stash, so please keep a lookout. We've been shipping products and posting some updates on them. I'm very happy to show them to anyone who wants to reach out and find out more. But yeah, follow our page to keep abreast of all the latest stuff we're launching.
Rock and roll. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You bet. It's been a ton of fun, and keep me updated as we go forward.